If somebody had said to me, The Evil Dead was Sam Raimi's first feature film, I'd said, okay, I believe that. No, Wayne. It's Murder from 1977, filmed in college. That was his first film.
That makes sense because not a lot of filmmakers start in college just kind of honing their craft, because you can teach people the theory, you can teach them techniques, but really you just need to get a camera, go out there, and you just need to film something. Even if it's crap, at least you learn from it.
Can you remember in the 2000s when Sam Raimi released Drag Me to Hell?
Yes.
Great film, and they were saying, look, it's a return to his Evil Dead-ness.
Mm-hmm.
And there's this, this theory, or not theory, there's this idea that Sam Raimi is a horror director. But if you look at his filmography, apart from The Evil Dead, Army Darkness, I'm throwing that in there also, it's the same, world. A lot of his films aren't actually horror.
They're not. I think Sam Raimi has kind of the John Carpenter thing where I don't think Carpenter necessarily meant to go into horror, but of course he had his big hits with things like Halloween and things like The Fog and The Thing. He was kind of pigeonholed as the horror director. Sam Raimi had the same thing, but you look at his filmography, he'll make a film over here, Little Independent, then he'll make something like Spider-Man, which is way over here.
Because if you think, right, we've got Evil Dead 1, 2, Army of Darkness, Evil Dead 3, essentially. So between then, we've got films like Crime Wave.
Yeah.
Which was, Wayne, importantly, do you know who co-wrote Crime Wave?
Who?
The Coen brothers.
Coen brothers.
And here's a little factoid in Sam Raimi's world. There's Scott Spiegel, who would direct Intruder, for example. He is within Sam Raimi's world, akin to Bruce Campbell. Mm. And here is a household. Now listen to this, Wayne. In the same household, when they moved to LA, especially Scott Spiegel, who works a lot with Sam Raimi, they all lived together. These names, Wayne. Scott Spiegel.
Yeah.
Sam Raimi. The Coen brothers, Holly Hunter, and Frances McDormand all lived in the same household together.
It makes sense that the Coen brothers and Frances McDormand all live together, but then you throw those other ones into the mix as well.
There's a heady mix. That is a lot of wacky-do shit going on there.
It's like when you hear that wrestlers or MMA fighters, a lot of them live together. But imagine just the ideas that were being thrown around in those rooms. Like when you think of the Coen brothers, how quirky those films are, and Sam Raimi's as well, just what the thought process must have been there, just the gestation of ideas must have been fascinating.
Well, as I said, the Coen brothers would co-write Crime Wave. Sam Raimi would be one of the co-writers of the Hudsucker Proxy for the Coen brothers. So you're getting this blending of the worlds. And, as far as pulpy as Sam Raimi is, the Coen brothers are somewhat pulpy themselves. They're still working within genre.
Definitely, well, things like Raising Arizona, for example, are very specific. And then you have your No Country for Old Men's, that taking the classic cliches, the classic concepts of the genres, and very much subverting them. That's basically what they've done throughout their whole career, the Coen brothers.
And you know what we like to do, Wayne? This whole 6 degrees of separation type thing. Scott Spiegel, he introduced Quentin Tarantino to Lawrence Bender, who would go on to produce Reservoir Dogs.
Yes, and Pulp Fiction as well.
Exactly.
Yeah, and I think he actually appeared in Pulp Fiction. He had a cameo, I think, but it's one of the most prominent names is just Lawrence Bender in the credits. So, again, fortuitous circumstances.
So let's talk, right, Sam Raimi. What would you say are some of his tropes? He's a very ingenious director. For example, in Evil Dead, because we're on such a limited budget for The Evil Dead, to replicate a Steadicam, they'd essentially just pin a handheld or a small camera to a plank of wood. Somebody would be holding it on the left, somebody would be holding it on the right, and that way they were acting as a stabilizer. That's how you got them shots of the camera as the spirit, or whatever you want to say, going through the woods, them rushed scenes, and it worked so well.
We've made this point before when we spoke about El Mariachi.
Right.
You got Robert Rodriguez working on a budget of pretty much nothing. There's scenes where it looks like maybe a Steadicam shot, but it's him being, pushed in a hospital wheelchair? So you have to get those shots somehow, but it's showing how ingenious he is, able to work in a budget, just kind of DIY filmmaking.
Fast zooms as well.
Exactly.
Fast zooms. He's a very pulpy filmmaker, and I can see how he naturally segued into the superhero world. For example, Spider-Man.
With the more dynamic filmmaking,
Right.
the kind of quick cuts and filming cities from kind of wide-angle lenses. It's interesting how his experience in films like Evil Dead, like say Hudsucker Proxy, how it did kind of lend itself to the superhero genre. But even when he does superhero films, because he recently did Doctor Strange,
Yeah.
there was a lot of horror elements in that as well. It's like he does like to throw his, I don't know if you've seen that, but he does like to throw his horror elements in. It's like these interdimensional horror beings coming from other dimensions. How he likes to inject those into his narrative.
Well, his first foray, I would say, can you remember Darkman?
Yes, Darkman.
Starred Liam Neeson. It was okay. I mean, it's a genre I'm not particularly fond of, but you could see his craft working its way into the genre.
It did look like very much a Sam Raimi kind of film. But then again, as we've asked, what is a Sam Raimi film? I think he's, I wouldn't say a master of all genres, but he is a man who doesn't like to be pigeonholed into one of them. He does like to explore other ones, and he can take techniques from one and lend them to another.
He works within a large span of genres, but he always, I'd say, brings his own pulp aesthetic for the most part. And, you know, we're on about tropes, Wayne. Here is one of the funniest ones I can think of, right? It's not really a trope, but in The Evil Dead, Bruce Campbell is driving that car. It's an iconic car. It's a 1973 Oldsmobile Delta 33, referred to as the classic. I think it was Sam Raimi's own car at the time. But did you know that appears in almost every single film Sam Raimi has made? But here is the funniest little tidbit, right? You know his film The Quick and the Dead, set in the Wild West? It was even in that. But of course, there was no cars there, Wade. There was no cars. So how do we get around this? Well, it was disguised under a tarp as a wagon.
All right. Do you think someone said something like, "I'm going to put my classic in there, Sam? There was no cars back then. Oh, we'll find something." So you're telling me this Oldsmobile, this classic, that is the ultimate long-running Sam Raimi Easter egg.
Exactly.
You know what's annoying now? Every time I watch a Sam Raimi film now, I'm going to spend the whole time looking for an Oldsmobile.
You're looking for the classic.
I'm looking for his classic.